Yo, what's up guys? Different kind of video. Ultimate beginner guide for 2023, probably still relevant in 2024 if you're watching it by that time. And the main reason that I'm making this ultimate beginner guide is because a lot of the things that's recently changed of how the game mechanics work, how the game works, what kind of teams should you focus on, what kind of monsters should you focus on, but also just a general brief explanation of how does the game work for people that are maybe returning players, people that are completely new players. Just understanding the game, what is the game, is it worth to play this game because it's a 9-year-old game but it's been revamped by quite a lot of things as well. I'm going to be making a standalone video on is this game worth to play in 2023 or 2024 at a later moment, but from this video I kind of want to refer some things back to this video. So this video is going to be more of a guide of like, okay, the early steps in the game, what should you focus on, how does the game work, what are the game mechanics that are the main things that you have to be caring about, what units, what to play, where to find your information. That's a very important one, and let's just go with it from there. So first of all, I think most people kind of know, but what is Summoners War? Summoners War is a gacha collector game. It's been running for 9 years. We recently had the 9th anniversary event. Going into the 10th anniversary event, I can bet you that that's going to be a good one. But what does it mean to be a gacha collector game? It means that you have certain monsters. Some of them you can obtain free to play, some of them you can only get from certain scrolls or pools or anything like that. You have chances to get them, and then you have to upgrade them to get towards a higher level. You also have to awaken them to get extra skills in there, and then you equip runes on them to give them extra power, and then you also have artifacts to give another stat in there. That is the most basic of it, and then of course you have whole bunch of units, and they keep adding more and more units. And we also have second awakenings, which is like reviving your old 3 stars that were not really great into like a state that they're kind of like 4.5 star ish. We have a whole bunch of net 5s and everything, and they keep adding more and more new units, and therefore also adding more mechanics to that game. And then of course you also have the different elements of fire, water, wind, and light and dark. Simply meaning fire beats wind, wind beats water, and water beats fire, and light and dark beats each other, so both of them have extra damage, or at least extra crit rate in that sense. So first of all, thing to mention, is it worth playing this game in 2023? I'm going to make a standalone video on that specifically of all the things, but I kind of want to briefly address that in this video as well. The main thing is the game is 9 years old, so a bunch of things are outdated, but there's actually also a whole bunch of things that are very nice in this game. For example, we have the auto farming right now, but while we do auto farming, I can still do a lot of other things at the same time, which is definitely very nice. They upgraded the system of evolving to make it a lot easier to get all your 6 stars in, because this account is, I think, like 3 weeks old right now, and the amount of 6 stars that they have fully free to play is definitely a lot more than you were getting like 8-9 years back. 8-9 years back, within a month, I think I had like 1 or 2 6 stars. Currently, I'm having like pretty much half a box full already. So that's definitely something that has upgraded over time, and definitely also something that I would say it is worth playing this game because it's a lot easier to catch up on so many more mechanics than you had in the past actually. However, there's definitely a thing that if you were to play a game saying like, okay, I want to be top of the leaderboards, a game that's 9-year-old is probably not going to be your game, because you're just fighting against people that have, well, 9 years of experience, but also have been upgrading an account for 9 years. Were you to say like, is it impossible to catch up to these people? If you're fully free to play, it's going to take you, I would say, a good amount of like 3-4 years of active playing to get up to their level. 2 to 3, I would say. But that's also the big question. Do you want to be rank 1? Do you want to be top 1000? Do you want to be the top 10,000? Or do you just want to play like a casual game with a bunch of friends and just start upgrading and seeing if you enjoy the game? If you consider playing the game, just give it a try. See if you like it. Maybe play it with a bunch of friends. And the community is definitely something that a lot of the people that have been playing this game for a very long time mostly are saying like, hey, I'm still playing because of the community. And the community in this game is very nice. I'll give you a bunch of links of Discords and Reddit and all of that kind of stuff later, but definitely try to find your own friend group, whether that's a guild or anything like that. And that makes this game very enjoyable because everyone is very friendly. Everyone's also very much helping each other out. And that just makes this game very great in general. Is it the newest of the newest compared to like other games that are recently released? Maybe not, but if a game is running for 9 years, it's probably doing something right. Right? And of course, you're gonna have people that are next level complaining about the makers of the game, but to be honest, isn't pretty much everyone that plays World of Warcraft blaming Blizzard, everyone that plays RuneScape blaming Jagex, everyone that plays MapleStory blaming Nexon, and the list goes on and on and on. Like, people always complain. That's just the thing it is. It just depends on like what kind of group of people do you look at, and definitely all groups can complain to a certain extent. but it's mainly looking at like, okay, what are values for you, why you would or wouldn't play a game. So therefore, I'm just explaining this game to you, also for returning players, looking into like, okay, how is it different? Do you feel like catching up? And I would definitely say farming a month right now on the highest dungeon compared to farming, I would say, a year to a year and a half, 8 years back, it's probably equal. So that's kind of the comparison I can make, and I can honestly say that just simply by the amount of things that I farmed here on this account in like 3 weeks. It's insane how much stuff you can do if you play effectively, if you know what you're doing, and if you're watching my guides. So definitely subscribe if you haven't yet, if you want to see more like this, because I have a whole series on this account and it can definitely help you out with more beginner guides towards like, okay, how is the game working right now in 2023? How does a simple battle look like? Well, it depends on what kind of game mode you're playing, but you're playing either a 4v4, a 3v3, a 5v5. You have certain dungeons that are, you use 6 units or multiple teams of 6 units. And in this game, you have the gouge bar, which pretty much says like, okay, how much speed does a unit have? And then from there, you select what skill you want to use on a certain target and you start hitting that. With these arrows, a simple indicator of like, okay, this is my element, which is wind. If I hit one of the elements that is water, I have elemental advantage. And if I hit fire, I have elemental disadvantage. Just very simple things, but still briefly explained also within the tutorial. Especially if you're playing this game for the first time, you can also play this in auto. A lot of the things you can auto, especially for farming your dungeons and getting your runes and your upgrades that way. It's a lot of the things you do auto. But there's also a good amount of manual play, which is the management of where do you place your equipments, or the high level PvP, which in this case I played against an AI, or I can play against the defense that someone else set up and then against that AI. But you can also play against someone that is playing their real time, and that's probably what you have seen in other gacha games as well, where you're selecting like one unit after another and then you battle it out with whatever was picked on the field. And that is just to briefly explain the game mechanics of this game. Of course, there's a lot more to it, but those are of course for future videos or videos that are already made in. Let's look at some currencies, because in these games you always have a lot of currencies. We have energy, we have wings, we have mana, and we have crystals. Energy is to refresh your dungeons that you can do to get upgrades. This is definitely something that you'll always be using a lot of. You have these arena wings, and the arena wings are mainly used for, well, just arena, as it is called. Then we have mana, and mana is the main currency that we use for upgrading runes. But amongst upgrading runes, we also have a bunch of other things where we can upgrade with mana, and that's just a very useful resource. Then the last one is crystals. And crystals you could claim as the pay-to-win currency, but you can get a lot of crystals free to play as well. You get those from various achievements or other things that you do in the game, arena, guild battles, all of those kind of things also gives a little bit of crystals. And crystals is a very useful resource because crystals you can use to buy a lot of things. For example, you can do your summons on those. But in most cases, what we always recommend to do is actually refresh your energy based on those crystals. So if we were to say like, okay, I want to get more energy because I'm out of energy, I can use crystals to actually get that energy in. And then of course you take the best deal, which is 190 for 60. And that way you can keep playing the game. And you're going to notice you're going to get a lot of crystals early game because you're going to get a lot of those achievements in. And from those crystals, often you want to feel like, okay, I want to get those monsters I want to summon. Actually, don't use this. Use them somewhere else because you're going to get scrolls otherwise as well. Also going directly into, okay, what is summoning in this game? Well, we have a whole bunch of different scrolls. For example, 1 to 3 star scrolls. We have scrolls that give an instant net 5. We have scrolls 3 stars and all of the kind of stuff. And if we summon some of those, you get this animation and then you summon a bunch. You've probably seen this like a million times in other games as well. But let's look at like, okay, how do you upgrade your units the moment you have them summoned? I will talk a little bit more about monsters at a later part, explaining what units should you focus on early game, what are important units, and what are the units to look out for, and all of the other ones you just feed in, which I will talk about right now. How do you get those level ups? Because your unit, when you summon something, in this case is a 2-star. This is also not a very useful 2-star, but let's say that this is a useful 3-star that I want to start building. Well, first thing we have to do is we have to awaken it. Awakening is material that we get from a dungeon that we can find over here with Kairos. And then we have the Hall of Magic, Light, Dark, Fire, or Water. And all of those drop essences. And those essences we can use towards awakening. Awakening you only have to do once. You have certain games where you have to awaken multiple times. But in this case, I could simply say like, okay, I already have the materials. I would like to awaken my Mystic Witch into a Gina. And then she gets like a skill upgrade. She gets certain passive upgrade, she gets a leader skill, and she gets extra base stats, and her name becomes, rather than the family name, which is a Penguin Knight right now, it would transfer into the name of the unit specifically, which in this case is Donna. and in this case was Gina. So we have that figured out, awakening. Then for runes we can farm somewhere else, but we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk more about runes and artifacts, because these 6 places are the runes, and then we have 2 artifacts that we can add on top of that as well. But I'll explain that a little bit later. But to look back at the unit, we have the unit level 1 of 25 right now, and we have it 3-star. We can see that I have a bunch of other units that are 6-star and then 40-40, which is the max in this game. Well, how do we get there? We would have to evolve, power up a unit. So if we were to select this Gina once again, we can do 2 things. And this is actually changed for returning players as well. This is made a lot easier right now. It might be a little bit confusing at first if you're used to the old system, because the old system you would click a unit and then you would just click in a few other units that you want to feed to it, and therefore you upgrade. Currently it's a little bit different, but also a lot easier. So we can do power up and we can do evolve. Power up, I wouldn't really recommend to do too much, because power up is just increasing your levels. That's very useful, but you can just use the units in certain battles and get your levels that way. But what you cannot do in just battles is evolving them. And evolving them is making 3 stars to 4 stars and so on. So in this case, if we were to say, okay, I want to auto select, it will already know what kind of materials it can use and therefore feed that towards a unit. You can have different selections to say like, okay, what kind of units do I feed in that auto selection? And you can honestly say that if you remove these 2 and then you say like, okay, all of the 1 stars and the 2 stars you can also feed in. So you're not just using straight up material that's only for evolving, which is in this case these rainbow mons. These are only for evolving. You can't put them to battle. But all of those 2 stars are also not really useful. So with that we can simply say like, okay, we go level up on them. Might you be familiar with this game in the past, where you would say like, hey, normally we had to build a bunch of 2 stars and then the 2 stars max to 3 stars, and then those 3 stars can be fed into a 3-star to become a 4-star, and then you have a 4-star, and then you have to add 4 more 4 stars, and then you have a 5-star, you have to add 5 more 5 stars. You don't have to level up anymore. The system still works the same towards every level counts towards a star pretty much. So if I add a level 1 in or a 1-star in here, it counts as 1 for all of them. But as you can see, if I add in a 2-star, a 2-star counts as 2, because 2 is 2 1-stars before. But then if we add a 3-star, a 3-star is 6, because that is technically, if you will have to go all the way the route down, it is 3 times over a 2-star to get that in. And if we were to lock in a 4-star, that is then 4 times a 3-star maxed out, and then so far. And then also the unit itself, so technically 4. So that's how you get these numbers, and that's also where you can lock all of these things in. I don't really have a 5-star example right now, do I? Nope. But that's the thing, you no longer have to level your units anymore. So in the past we were actually leveling the units to max, so you had to be like at level 20, 2-star, then level them up to a 3-star, and then those 3 stars I could use later. Nope, it's still the same thing, doesn't matter max level, no max level. So definitely something that I would say is a lot easier right now. And definitely something that might be a little bit confusing at the start, but you'll definitely get through if you just understand like, okay, I just need as many stars as possible. I need as many monsters as possible, which we'll give a few tips for later. So that is to evolve and therefore get higher stars. Now we also have a higher max level, but to get those max levels in, we could use the power up. But in most cases, you just simply want to go into a dungeon, and we have the auto repeat farm here as well, where we could say like, okay, I have a certain dungeon, for example, Fame on Hell, which is pretty common. And I want to throw in that unit, and I let it battle and run a few times. And with that, we're going to level up those 4 units. And I can let that run, and it's going to run over there. But I can also close it and then go somewhere else at the same time. So you have this auto mechanic or auto battle mechanic right now. And you can still do other parts in the game right now. I can still go into arena right now if I would want to and say like, okay, I have a bunch of these rifles. Rifles also give crystals, they give metals, which are very useful, which I'll talk a little bit more later. We can go into the battle right now, and we can actually see that we're doing multiple things at the same time, because I'm still leveling those units in the background while I'm also clearing this right now, which is a very nice mechanic that you can do multiple things at the same time, and therefore not always have to look at the screen when you're doing something relatively more auto or boring or anything like that. And that is added in recent time. And I definitely, one of those changes that I do really like, because we can also see right here, this fight is pretty much also almost over. And it's repeating 10 times, so it's definitely not something that you have to look at the screen all the time, but every so often you can see like, okay, what are your rewards and how did that work out? Okay, so let's say you decided to start to play the game. What should you focus on? What should you do? Well, there's this tutorial at the start of Elia that kind of talks to you about the game, a little bit about the game mechanics. It leads you into some of these early stages. But the main thing that you're actually focusing on is not buying packs right away. That's definitely, they pop up a bunch of packs every time, like, oh, you want this scroll? No, I actually recommend you to not buy anything for the first months of playing and just first see if you enjoy the game. If you enjoy the game, then you can start thinking about those pop-up of packs. But until then, I would recommend you just, well, you can play this free to play. You can actually get very far free to play. But the main thing you should focus on is Summoner's Way. And Summoner's Way are the achievements within this game. And there's just a whole list of things that you have to do, and you just get a lot of these achievements in, you get a lot of these crystals in, you get a lot of crafting materials in, you get a lot of these awakened materials in, you get a bunch of units for free right away, you get the magic mic for free. It's a magic knight, but I also call it a magic mic. You get so much stuff over here, and it's very easy to do. Plus, you also have these, I am not sure if I can still see it. No, there's another event that's below this one. I can't see it anymore, but that one is giving you runes right away. And runes I haven't talked about much yet, but you don't have to look at runes all too much. Just simply use whatever runes the game gives you at the beginning, and that can definitely take you like a week or 2 weeks down the line, because the game actually gives you very good runes right now. They're instantly they're instantly plus 15 for some of them. They have good subsets, definitely something you can use. And your first 5, 6, 7 rune sets you pretty much just get from the game, and afterwards you have to start thinking like, okay, where do I get my rune sets? How do I want to upgrade them? But until then, just focus as much as you possibly can on these achievements. Get all of these achievements in, and that's going to bring you very far into this game already. A thing that I forgot to mention before is that as new user support, you also have the Goddess Ameria's Blessing, and that gives you a lot of good stuff. So it gives you free rune removal throughout all the time. So I haven't spoken about runes yet. So with runes, normally there is a fee if you want to remove a rune from a certain unit and place it somewhere else. During the first month of the game as a new player, you don't have any fee on that. Upgrading your runes is halved. You get 100% extra mana, and you have all of the attribute dungeons open for your awakening. Plus you get extra points for your glories as well. So this is definitely a very good month. Like the first month on any new account is very good to get a lot of progression in right away. Another thing you always want to check out for are events. Events that are running are always different by the time that you start playing the game, or that the game is running at that time. Currently, we have a bunch of events which are very good for beginners. If you're watching this video on the time of release, we have this booster fever and progression support. You're gonna get a lot of good stuff over there. And definitely a very nice time to start playing. But I'm not gonna go too much into these events because it's very depending from time to time what kind of events you have. So a bunch of tips when you start playing, definitely a bunch of things that you want to do. First of all, they will at some point introduce you to Arena. Arena is where you set up a defense, and then you can fight defense of other players. You want to set up a defense that's actually very weak. And the reason for that is, if you put a defense down that's very weak, you have other players that can clear you very easily. But that also means that you will find more players that you can clear very easily. And the reason why you want to do that is because the easier you can clear those, the more points you can get in glory points. You can't see them right now because they're at the bottom left, but we can also see them over here. These are my glory points. This is definitely a currency you very much want, because from glory points, you can do a bunch of things. Skill ups, which we haven't talked about yet. A Devilmon. Devilmon is a free skill up on any unit. Only use those on 5 stars or second awakening units. Because if you use skill ups on 3 stars or 4 stars, it's kind of a waste, because you can get those easier by just feeding in a same family of a unit. I will show you how that works. So an example of skill ups. If we check over here, we can see that math has certain skill ups. So with skill ups, you have cooldown reducers, you have extra harmful effect increase, extra recovery, extra damage, anything like that. How do we get those skill ups? Well, we could give that Devilmon. The Devilmon is clearly a skill up right away. But in this case, Math is a Penguin Knight, and Math is by base a 3-star. That means that I can feed other Penguin Knights into him from the same family, and it also shows as skill up. So definitely if you go to this sealed shrine, you want to select it by monster, and then you can select in like, okay, I want to feed those 3 penguins into his brother, and therefore this Penguin Knight will actually get these skill ups. You can also do that with 5 stars, but with 5 stars, those are the most rare of summons, and you would have to feed him multiple 5 stars to get those. Definitely not recommended, but what you would want to do then to get the skill ups of this unit in, because this one, for example, doesn't have any skill ups. I have an example of Sigmaris. Sigmaris has a few skill ups already, and these skill ups came from just feeding in those Devilmons towards those units. So definitely something that if you do Arena, at some point you're gonna fight opponents that are very strong, they have a full team of maxed units. Definitely not something you want to fight. You just want to look for those people that have lower runes or don't have any teams that show any level 40s, and that makes it a lot easier. Of course, always do your rifle battles if they're up. I haven't done them today yet, but definitely something that you also should focus on. But the moment that you have people that can clear you very easily, you at some point get a history list of people that also mainly have one unit in there. So in here, there's a bunch of people I have been attacking. They have been attacking me. I attack them back. And back and forth, we keep hitting each other with just one unit. And if you have this kind of guy in there, it just makes it so much easier to not waste too much time. And you're still getting as many points for clearing this one or clearing a whole team of like level 40 units. Sure, you're not gonna climb very high on the leading board yet, or as a beginner player, that doesn't really matter too much. You just want to get all of your wings in as fast as possible. I have currently 7 out of 10 wings. But you just want to clear those wings and then have them on cooldown and then just use them again the moment. Were you to say like, okay, it's not that expensive to get the Devilmon, it's just like 180 and I already have like 260 points. Should I then still care about it? Should I start buying scrolls? Because the scrolls always look very tempting, but no, you actually want to go for buildings. And buildings is horizontal progression in this game. Because I get 16 crit damage on all of my units in any content from just having this thing in there. If I were to upgrade this right now to a higher level, I would get 17 crit damage on everything. That's definitely something like all of those, especially speed is very important in this game. Getting extra energy storage is definitely helpful. But the one I would say, if you're a free-to-play player, and that's the most important one, is the Mysterious Plant, because the Mysterious Plant is going to give you more resources towards getting more energy. So your energy is refilling every so minutes, but you can make that 30% faster. So definitely something that you want to aim on in early game, to get all of those glory towers in, to get extra stats in. And that's just very helpful when you have that 1-star unit in there. Just because you save a lot of time, because people clear you easy, you clear them easy, you get a lot of these points, you can trade them in for very nice buildings. Besides those buildings, there's also a whole bunch of buildings that you could buy from the shop itself. And this is just something that the game kind of talks you through with the storyline at some point, saying like, okay, maybe you should build this, maybe you should build that. Just follow those things. There's a bunch of very useful buildings, such as storages, such as storing all of your units that you're not using. Also for returning players, you probably haven't seen that, but instead of having all your Rainbow Mons stored in here, you can actually store all of your Rainbow Mons in here. But then they have a number of how many you have. You can have like thousands of them in here without filling the storage in here. But you can also do the same for every individual unit. You can store them multiple times in here. As long as they don't have runes and they're not locked, you can just store them simply in here. And that just makes it that your box is not overfilling with a lot of things. And it also makes it very easy to store a lot of things, but also get your upgrades from your evolving from here at some point, because you're storing things and you can start using them later. So then the question may be, okay, we have to use monsters to do evolves. Where do we get a lot of monsters? Well, you can get some monsters from just fighting those battles, which are still going on the background, but you don't get too many of them. Something that you do get a lot of monsters from are the Unknown Scrolls. The Unknown Scrolls is one of the better places to get a lot of those monsters in for your evolve. Where can you get a lot of Unknown Scrolls? Well, actually from the shop. The shop actually starts off with like 1 or 2 rows, and you can buy them extra for crystals and for mana. Definitely recommended to do. You can also refresh this shop for 3 crystals. It's not that expensive. Don't really recommend to do it too much too early, but it's definitely your way of saying like, okay, I can buy a lot of these monsters from here. And these monsters buying, I can then use towards skill ups, because if I have different howls, there's actually the water howl, that's a pretty strong unit. You can use those as skill ups, but you can also just simply say, we're going to use those to whatever unit I want to go for my next evolve. And then you can see a bunch of those units that I just bought are selected in here right now to evolve to a higher level. And that's definitely a way to get a lot of those 6 stars in pretty quick. So from here, let's also transition into runes and artifacts. So at the start of the game, you will right away get a bunch of runes. You don't really have to equip too many runes, or you don't have to focus that much on upgrading runes. With those runes, you have multiple sets, and the sets give you certain set effects. And from there, it's getting like extra stats. It's getting 22% chance of getting an extra turn. There's a lot of those sets that are very useful. And it's just kind of figuring out what kind of sets are the main thing. But I can already tell you that if we look at the main sets that are very common, Swift gives you extra speed. That is definitely a very common one. Despair gives a chance to stun on every skill you did, including AoE hits. So very strong if you have a unit with multiple AoE hits. Then you can multiple times stun the whole battlefield, if you're quite lucky on that, because this is 25% chance. We have Vampire, of course, gives a life drain. We have Violent, which I would say is the most common rune in the game, because it gives you 22% chance to get an additional turn after you just took a turn. Very strong. Revenge, pretty strong. Something that might be new for also returning players is we have Seal runes, which denies all of the rune effects of other runes. So if Seal is placed on a unit, you can no longer Fire proc, you can no longer Despair. Seal is somewhat rare to see still right now. I think it's not on point yet where it's strong enough, but it might be buffed in the future. And then we have intangible runes, and intangible runes are very nice. They're very rare to get. But an intangible rune is like a wild card rune. Let's say I have a rune set of 2 blade runes because you have 2 sets and 4 sets. Violent is a 4 set, Despair is a 4 set, Swift is a 4 set. Most of the good ones are 4 sets. But we also have Will, which gives immunity that you cannot get debuffed. For example, that is a 2 set. Let's say I have 2 will runes, so I have my will set completed, and I have 3 fire runes, but I don't really have that 4th fitting fire rune. I can place an intangible rune, and that intangible rune would then count as a fire rune. You can only have 1 intangible rune per unit, so it would only count towards 1 set, but still a very strong addition, which I definitely do really like. From there, we can also right away look into artifacts. Artifacts you're gonna see a little bit later into the game, because artifacts you get from specific dungeons. Runes you can kind of get everywhere, but the main thing where you get runes are the giants, the dragons, necro, and then also newly added spiritual realm. So with those dungeons, you have like specific rune sets that you get. For example, Swift and Despair comes from the giants. Dragon gives you violent runes. Necro gives you more of the damage runes towards rage, which gives extra crit damage. And also those will runes, which you can also check what kind of runes do they drop over here in the drop info. And you can also see the strategy info of like, okay, what kind of teams are people using, or more specifically, what kind of units are people using. If you start off the game, that Steel Fortress and Punisher script are not unlocked yet. They are unlocked from level 27, I think. But the moment that you unlock them, it's definitely very recommended to do, because for runes, the higher you do the level, the higher grade of rune that you get. So you have 1-star runes all the way to 6-star runes. In the end, we're pretty much only using 6-star runes. We're not really using 5 stars or anything anymore. But you want to farm at least B10 to get those 6-star runes. And the moment that you farm Abyss and Heart, that is where you get higher grades. So we have different grades of runes. Let me show you. So if we go to those runes, I don't think I have anything that is not 6-star as of this moment. However, we can see the difference between a yellow one and a purple one. Purple one means that it was a hero, so it already has 3 lines. And a legendary always starts with 4 lines. That also means that if you start upgrading runes, if I were to upgrade this rune right now, I could instantly go for the plus 12. We no longer have for returning players, once again, that thing that you have to check it multiple times, like how far is it going for rolling. No, we have instantly plus 12, let's go. It rolled everything in 1 line, or it actually rolled 1 in each line. That's not what we want to see, because if you have multiple lines in there, it is possible to get the same roll in 1 line. And then there's also a min and a max of like, how much can it actually roll? But the more that you have, this one also, this one also went everything in 1. Okay, in this one we have 1 that went double. And definitely speed is a good stat, but you want to go for those doubles, those triples, or even the quadruples. The quadruples are very rare, but very good. If you get them, for example, in high speed or high crit rate, definitely very nice. But in the early game, you don't have to focus too much on runes. You're going to get a bunch of good runes, and then from there you can start transitioning into like, okay, now I have to start farming runes. What kind of runes do I keep? What kind of runes do I sell? What is useful for my units? But that's definitely something for a later video. However, that's still kind of the basics of runes where you want to look at like, okay, the higher the stat or the higher the stars, the better it is, the better the quality. And that goes from white to green to blue to purple to yellow. Same as in most games, I would say. But every upgrade you have, you also have an extra line on the base of the star. But every upgrade you have, you also have an extra line on the base. So if I were to check a blue rune, I actually have a bunch of lower runes. But a blue rune will always start off with 2 lines. Even if it's 4 stars, it will have 2 lines. But that also makes it easier to roll into. Because if I just need this stat, it's a lot easier to get 2 rolls into this if there's only 2 options, rather than for this one where, let's see, rather than for this one where I have 3 different options. So in this case, it's a 1 out of 3, whereas this one is just a 1 out of 2. So the higher grade also makes it that you need to be slightly luckier to get the good. However, then back to artifacts. Artifacts are slightly different. In the early game, you don't have to focus too much on them, except that you just have to get them. And that you can do from level 27. And by getting them, you just farm one of the lower dungeons, and you already get artifacts. But artifacts work a little bit different. They don't have stars, they just have their grade of being normal or being rare or being hero, and those are those colors. But as you can see, the base stat is all the time, every time the same. Also, there's no plus 15 on these artifacts. The artifacts are instantly plus 15. So these are already the stats for a full maxed out artifact. In this case, I would definitely recommend the moment you can go into artifacts, just clear out the bunch of these lower dungeons. You're gonna get a whole bunch of white artifacts, but those white artifacts already give you 100 base attack or like 1500 base HP. Like all of these things are very useful to get in just the base stats. And then the extra alliance is definitely something that you can look at later, what is useful. I can already spoil to it. Elemental damage on specific elements is definitely something that you're going to be using a lot. For example, I use this bird a lot to kill fire, 14% damage on fire. That just increases your whole damage output by 14%, which is of course a lot of damage in that way. But those are definitely things that you can look at a little bit later. But just getting those base stats in of extra attack and extra HP helps you a lot in the early game to progress further. And we also can see that we finished the run of 10. We can see the clear times and everything like that. We can see that we got a whole bunch of runes that we don't care about. We auto sell all of those. And then we go again for a repeat battle. So now we spoke a lot about like, okay, game mechanics, runes, upgrades, all of that kind of stuff. But what monsters should you focus on? What monsters are important for the early game? Well, I can tell you that the game currently gives you, with Summoner's Way, a lot of those very useful units early on already. So a bunch of these things that I already cleared, I cannot see them anymore. But for example, in Necropolis, a very strong unit is this Colleen. And you're just gonna get straight up that Colleen. Same thing with Crow, that is the Inugami of Dark. You just straight up get this unit. You don't get it in this state because it's already second awakened, but you get a non-awakened version of it. Very strong unit as well. But let's look at a few units you should definitely focus on in the early game. Early game, the game really focuses you on Lapis. Like there's a lot of achievements around Lapis. It's a very strong unit, has AoE skills, is a very good farmer, and this unit will bring you very far if you give it some love, some of the good runes, and absolutely a unit you're going to be using throughout your first few weeks of the game. Crow, as mentioned before, is probably your strongest single target damage dealer that you're gonna get early on. And also, once again, definitely a unit you want to be focusing on. Colleen is a very good support that you could be focusing on. Belladil is a unit you have to get through a specific way, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later, which is secret dungeons, but I'll explain that later. But definitely a unit that you want to be focusing on as well. Another unit that you see pretty much everyone use is Lauren. Also, once again, secret dungeons, so I'll mention that in a second. We have Fran. Fran you also get freely from the game right now. Also, once again, very strong support unit. And we have Shannon, I would still say very strong support unit. And I would say if you go into more 4 stars, because those that I all mentioned were base 3 stars. We also have a bunch of base 4 stars, but even base 5 stars that everyone can get through fusing. Verdehaio is one of those, and Verdehaio is one of the, like this whole game is revolving around when does something get a turn. Attack bar is very important. This unit, for every crit he does, he gets 20% attack bar to the whole team. But every hit that he does actually has a multi-hit and a multi-hit. So everything is 2 hits. So this passive just gives straight up 40% attack bar to the whole team. Plus he has a leader skill. That's 28% speed in dungeons. Insanely strong unit to get early game. But you have to fuse that. What is fusing exactly? So if we go to the fusion circle over here, which the game at some point tells you to build, you have a bunch of units which you can just use here. From throwing other units in, you first have to make them 4 star, you have to max level them, you have to awaken them. But afterwards, you just throw these in and you get this rare unit very easily. You can even do that with some of the 5 stars. And one of the 5 stars that I would say by far is the strongest right now is Veramos. Yes, he's actually one of the best units in the game right now for early game, but even late game he's still used quite a lot. So fusing Veramos, and the game actually helps you with a bunch of those fusion materials as well. But fusing that Veramos is very useful early game. So we have that Veramos also built over here, definitely a good unit to focus on. The main thing that he becomes good is because he has damage from enemy max HP, but he also lowers the attack bar and he stuns units. So once again, if you have a game that's very depending on attack bar manipulation is always very strong. And that is also exactly what this Lauren does. But then single target. And every turn she manipulates that attack bar. So even if you have a way weaker team that can't really survive against the boss, if the boss never takes a turn, you're going to win, right? And that's where she becomes very good in. So I mentioned you get her from Secret Dungeon. Might you ask like, okay, how do you get all of this knowledge of what units I can get and how do I pull them? And is this a Secret Dungeon? Is it not a Secret Dungeon? Well, there's a website, for example, Swarm Farm, which is one of the links down below here. And that pretty much has like a bestiarity of all units in there. You can look them up. You can see the base stats. You can see the skill ups. You can see the damage multipliers. Because damage multipliers for some reason are not shown in the game. But they are shown on Swarm Farm. So definitely a website that you want to check out is Swarm Farm. Because it can help you with a lot of things of just understanding the units. Figuring out where the units are getting from. What kind of skills they have, etc. As I mentioned, Secret Dungeon. Where is a secret dungeon? Well, a secret dungeon is part of Kairos, and we can see over here that there's currently no secret dungeons to enter. So I don't have any secret dungeon, but also none of my friends that I have. If you farm one of those Hall of Elemental things, except the Hall of Magic, you can get a drop of a secret dungeon. From the secret dungeon over here, you can also check like, okay, which units are available through that secret dungeon. You can also currently, that is newly added, and that's definitely something that is very helpful, you can craft secret dungeons. So if we go to others right here, we can craft a secret dungeon of any of those dungeons saying like, okay, I need to get that Lauren, but I also need to get that Belladion, which is the water, which is the light Inugami and the light cowgirl. I can simply say like, okay, I want to craft this, and it gives me a chance of getting any of those dungeons. However, you don't have to do that by yourself. You can actually use the community. If you are in specific channels, you can see like, oh, this actually got the Fire Garuda. I would like to have that Fire Garuda as well. I can request to enter that. Some people have it that they automatically accept them. Some people don't. But you can just request that. Yeah, this one is automatically accepted. So from there, I can say right now, okay, I can start farming that pixie. And that's a specific dungeon that I can do. And I can just farm that multiple times and I get that unit eventually. So that is made a lot easier than in the past. You always had to write and to chat and that kind of stuff, kind of annoying. But it's made a lot easier right now. And definitely check out those channels that are more active. It kind of depends which server you're at. But in most cases, 101 or 108 are very active channels. So we spoke a bit about units that are very useful. A very strong team early on is going to be that Vampire in combination with that Fran, in combination with that Lauren, in combination with a Veramos. And then you would add in a damage dealer, for example, with that Crow. That's already a very strong team if you have those 5 units. Max leveled, awakened, and everything. There's also ways for the second awakening, but I think I'll just keep that towards another video. It's also somewhat explained in the game as well. But those are definitely units that I would say, if that is your core team early on, you will have a very strong team. And of course, you're using a lot of Lapis early on as well. But then the question might be like, okay, I'm pulling a lot of units. I don't really know what is good, what is not good. It's so confusing. There's so many units. Well, I would say for every 4-star that you pull, keep it. And that is just simply every 4-star that you pull, you're just gonna keep until you feel like, okay, this is a 4-star that I like that much. I could maybe feed his brothers into, but I would keep at least one unique version of all of them. So I could say like, okay, I have 2 of these dice meditations right now. I could feed away one for a skill up to another one, but I'm always going to keep at least one either build or just in storage here, just to be safe that you don't feeding away anything that might be good at a later point. For 3 stars, I would do the same thing, but for 3 stars, there's actually a lot of them that you can use for skill ups. You want to use them for skill ups. And a bunch of families that are important for skill ups are going to be as follows. I am going to show them from the collection log because that's easier because I don't have all of the units right now. So in the collection log, we can see all of those units. Let's select them from fire. And then for the units that you want to keep as skill ups are going to be the Harpus because they go into the fire one, which is very strong, which also this one, the Colleen. You want to keep Pixies because you probably want to build the Shannon at some point, which is a very strong early game unit. You want to keep a lot of Inugamis because Inugami is actually a very popular family where Rogue is a very strong unit. Ikaru is a very strong unit. If you watch a lot of guides that were made like a year or 2 years earlier, all of them were talking at some point, okay, build Trikaru, which is 3 times an Ikaru. We don't longer really need those kind of teams because the higher end dungeons that we farm right now do not allow us to use duplicates of units in there. So therefore, Trikaru team is something in the past that was very good. But if you're looking at an older guide, it's going to tell you to make that, but it's no longer as good. So I wouldn't really focus too much on Ikaru. However, we have that Rogue you want to get the skill ups in. We're going to have that Balladion you want to get the skill ups in and the 2A. Also for the Rogue, you're going to get 2A at some point. And also that Crow. So that's already a lot of skill ups. So that's a lot of Inugamis. You need like probably 8 or 9 Inugamis or even more than that per Inugami that you max out all the way. So you're going to need a lot of those Inugamis. So definitely something you want to save. And the moment you have a bunch of them, you have your Crow. You can say like, okay, Crow, eat like 3 of your brothers for skill ups. Howl is something that's very easy to get, but Lulu is a unit that's later on used as well as Second Awakening. Pretty strong unit as well. Cats, I would definitely keep the Martial Cat. And the Martial Cat is mainly going for Naomi. Naomi Second Awakening is a very strong unit. I could say Vagabonds for the Wind one, but that is somewhat more of a PvP unit later game. So if you feed a bunch of them, it's not too much of an issue. Continuing on, Seth is pretty much a strong unit, but that's also a team that was more of a recent meta thing for dungeons where you just kill everything but dots. But once again, the highest dots currently, they don't only not allow you to bring multiple units, you can also not dot them, which is damage over time. And then this unit could do every damage over time to a higher standard, and then with another unit you could explode all of those damage over times. Very nice mechanic, but it's no longer really as strong anymore because you just cannot land those damage over times on the boss. A unit that I personally really like, somewhat more later game as well, are Drunken Masters, and all three of the Drunken Masters are pretty strong, so it's not bad to start saving some of the Drunken Masters already. A unit that the game forces you to build at some point, which is used for just one specific dungeon, but is definitely good, is this one. However, you don't need too many copies of it, so if you feed a bunch of those, it's really not that. This unit is, besides very cute, also a pretty strong unit and definitely used in later stage of PvP. But early game PvE, you're not gonna really use it too much, but a unit you might keep once or twice, just to be sure that once you actually want to start using it, you already have those copies in there. Another unit that you definitely want to keep a whole bunch of copies of are the Griffins. You are most likely going to be building a Bernard in the later game, but definitely a Spectra in the early game. And Spectra is a very strong damage dealer because it does damage from enemy max HP. So you only have to scale crit rate, crit damage on it. And then the scaling of the damage comes from how much HP the enemy has, which is definitely something you use a lot in dungeons such as dragons to get your fire runes in. So Spectra is definitely a must build for pretty much every. High Elementals are somewhat more of a PvP unit, but definitely a very strong unit as well. Has a very strong skill of ignoring defense that is used a lot, but also attack buff and speed buff, and becomes invincible herself. So that's a very strong combination of units that you want to use. Probably I missed a few more that you would say like, these might be useful, those might be useful. One that I actually showed myself earlier, Math. Very strong unit, but also a little bit later game, but definitely a unit that you're gonna keep a bunch of copies of. But those are, I would say, the main units. I might have been missing like one or two more PvP related later game units that you could say like, hey, focus on these, focus on that. I would definitely keep every copy that you have, or I would definitely keep at least one copy of every unit that you have. But afterwards, you can start feeding them up for either evolves or skill ups or anything like that. And that definitely helps you progress a lot faster rather than just storing everything, not really sure what to use. But just evolving and using them helps you to progress a lot faster rather than if you would store everything, you're never using anything, you're just stacking up a whole pile of resources. Like in the end, resources are nice, but if you don't spend your resources, you might as well not have. Okay, so that wraps it up for most part of this video. The video is pretty lengthy already, but there's just so much content to talk about. Of course, I gave you the tips of like, okay, what units should you focus on and where to progress, like mainly in the summoner's way. However, at some point you're gonna get to a point of like, okay, I kind of have some units right now, I'm not really sure how to progress. There's always going to be that one point where you kind of feel like stuck, like, okay, what should I be doing? Should I be farming more 6-star? Should it be getting runes? Well, the runes you get from giants, dragons, and necro mainly. And the easiest one of those is going to be Dragon's Lair, because you have this specific team, and I would actually say that this team, I have a specific video for that as well. I will just pretty much, I will give the links to the videos that I made on this account prior of how I did my progression on the first few days in the description down below as well. But just simply using this team, which are pretty much all of the units that I earlier mentioned, except for this one, but you can get this one if you fully rune it though. But you can get this one for free as well because you have the choice of getting a specific 4-star at some point. But all of these units I could simply rune with the runes that the game gave to me through the achievements. And from there I could already farm this dungeon pretty fast into the game. Farming these other two dungeons is a lot harder, but this one is very easy if you focus the right units on those. Which is once again simple, that Verdeheil, that Lauren you want to get in there, the fusion of the Vermos, the Spectra you want to go towards that second awakening. But all of that is better explained in the other videos as well. And this video is getting pretty lengthy already, so I think that will be a wrap up for this video. Hope you enjoyed this beginner guide. Definitely do let me know in the comments what you thought about it, if it's useful, especially also towards newer players, but also returning players, just to see how the game progressed, evolved, made different. And maybe you want to give it another try of saying like, okay, well, I felt like I was quite far behind, but as you mentioned, 1 month of farming right now is equal to like a year of farming like 8 years back. I am 100% agreeing on that point. Like, absolutely, it's so much easier to progress right now. And that's just one of those things that like higher end players normally don't really see. I didn't really see it myself until you start playing a new account and then you're like, wow, I'm actually getting so much good stuff right now. It's insane. So Catching up, definitely doable. Making a lot of 6 stars, definitely doable. There's a few key points that you would say like, okay, it is somewhat difficult. Like, where do I get all of my skill up, especially for the 4 stars? There's a bunch of things that it still takes quite a while to get those in. But besides that, a whole bunch of those things are already addressed, and they just keep addressing things more and more and getting better and better quality of life updates. So definitely expecting to get those things fixed at some point in the future as well. So guys, that's wrapping up this video. Hope you enjoyed. See you hopefully in the next one, and see you in game.